when I first began introducing the human design system publicly in 1992, I did introductory lectures, and they were actually quite complex lectures. I actually began with the Big Bang and began with the basic physics of quarks and leptons and the emergence of this relationship of neutrino to the atom and so forth and so on. And one of my favorite illustrations from that era was the illustration of the vehicle. The vehicle. And to really understand what our lives are all about. You know, we cannot afford to just identify with the passenger. We have the design crystal, and this is the vehicle itself. And we have no control over that. We have no control, that is the passenger, over what the vehicle is, what model it is, what fuels it needs, where and how and what it's going to be, do, become. The passenger has no choice. It doesn't. And the passenger has no choice over where the vehicle goes in this life. The vehicle doesn't drive itself, it's just a vehicle. It's the driver. It's the monopole that moves it along its line of geometry. And no matter what the vehicle might like or what the passenger would desire, the driver is going to drive where it drives. And nothing is going to change that. It's this wonderful image of a limousine, you know, this wonderful vehicle. And sitting up front, you've got your chauffeur with a cap on, and it's ready to take you for your life's ride. And as a passenger, all you're doing is climbing into the back seat. You're not doing anything else. You're just there in the back seat. Nothing more, nothing less. As a matter of fact, there's nothing to worry about. There's nothing to be concerned about. You can't do anything about what the vehicle is. You can't tell the driver where to go or not to go, or when to stop or when to start. In fact, there isn't anything you can do but sit back and look out the window. I mean, that's what it's about. That's what the passenger is here to do. Sit back, look out the windows, watch the movie. It's beautiful. And you will see something quite extraordinary. Your vehicle's just right. And your driver, your driver knows exactly where to take you. When you go to the Human Design Resource Center and you download a rave chart, you're really seeing it differently than the way in which I first drew out a chart back in January of 1987. It was interesting. The other day I was looking through some old papers of mine. I was looking for a document. I came across a bundle of charts, blank charts, that were used in the 1992 in working with the first students in human design, charts that they could color in because there was no computer program at the time, and there was no printout of charts, obviously. And in that original design, there was a body graph in the center, and on the left-hand side was a rave mandala with the design information, and on the right-hand side was a rave mandala, another wheel with the personality information. And basically what you were looking at is this triangle between these two circles. And when I lifted it out of the box that it was in, I lifted it up upside down, and when you look at that image upside down, it looks remarkably like a bicycle. And there is a deep joke in all of that, because really this is the first time that we have a legitimate graphic illustration of the vehicle that we call our life, because it's more than the body. It is the vehicle and the contents of the vehicle and the mechanics of the vehicle and all of the things that go with that. This vehicle is really something very, very beautiful. And it's so important to keep in mind this image of the separation of the wheels on either side of the triangle. And think about what they represent. You know, on the left-hand side, the design wheel, this is the design crystal information. This is the design crystal data. This is the data that we get by going back 88 degrees of the movement of the sun from the birth position. And when we look at the wheel on the right-hand side, this is the information of the imprinting of the personality, of the personality crystal. So we have on one side the design, and on the other side we have the personality. But the body graph is the integrative field. We cannot do the analysis of just one wheel or the other, the data of design or personality. It would lead nowhere. It would be incomplete. It is, in fact, what the history of this kind of analysis was like before human design. It is only through the synthesis in the body graph that we truly get to see the way in which the vehicle as a whole comes together. And the body graph is the realm of the magnetic monopole. I have the privilege of having already lived long enough to see the substantiation of the underlying physics of imprinting, the neutrino with mass being scientifically verified, the statistical verification of the division of humanity consistently into specific type and profile. But one of the things that I wait for, and hopefully I will also get to see, is the understanding of the nature of the magnetic monopole, because there is nothing that is more important to the completion of scientific thought in terms of unified field theory and physics as an example, to see the way in which everything operates in relationship to everything else. The heart and soul of that is the magnetic monopole. It is something extraordinary to me about the nature of Dirac. After all, it was he who postulated the existence and gave the name to the neutrino. But very few people know that he also postulated the presence of the magnetic monopole. This certainly was a very gifted filter of consciousness. The magnetic monopole sits in the sternum. It is in the G center in the body graph. And it is this body graph that is the integrative field of the two wheels. You can see that it is only through the body graph that we can begin a process of analysis, that it's only when the personality and the design are synthesized together within the context of the body graph that we get to see the complete and whole differentiated design. This is the work of the magnetic monopole. What is important about the monopole, this magnet that only attracts, that never repels, is that it has two functions. The first function is obvious. We have seen what it does. It will hold together in union the personality and the design, and in holding that together create the illusion of the wholeness that is us. At the same time, it has a second responsibility, and that responsibility is that it literally connects us to our line of geometry. In other words, it is attracted to a specific geometrical fractal line and moves us along in that line. It is the monopole that is our driver. This is the driver, not the vehicle, not the vehicle, not the passenger at all, just the driver, holding it all together through its movement through space, this illusion of a life held together by the magic of this magnetic monopole. I wait. The day will come, and then so much of what we've been unable to understand, at least scientifically, will finally be understandable. The design crystal. The design crystal takes the imprinting of the neutrino field and filters that imprinting, and the result is the vehicle itself, the form. It's one of the most important things to grasp about the nature of the design crystal. Now, the design crystal sits in the ajna center. What is very interesting about the design crystal is that in the 10 conception stages, that is from conception onward, the 10 stages of the first 88 degrees of life just after conception, that in the very beginning the design crystal is actually in the throat. In other words, it's part of the development of the infrastructure of the metamorphic process of the vehicle, helps in that sense design what the vehicle is going to be, designs the fetus in that sense. That the design crystal, in filtering the information, is only concerned with the vehicle itself. Now, we know that when we integrate the design crystal into the body graph, that when we bring it over and we carry it over in its red color, that we refer to it as the unconscious. Now, please understand that this is a term that is often deeply confused by psychological language. It's very important to see that when you're talking about the impact of the design on our life as a whole, that we have no conscious access to it. In other words, we don't know anything about it directly and can't. And it is one of the things that makes the design so mysterious and also establishes one of the basic tenets of what human design is about. It is about choicelessness and helplessness. It is about surrender. The very vehicle itself, not its passenger, not its driver, but the vehicle itself, we have no access to. None. It is why that human design in its mechanics simply shows us ways in which we can operate the vehicle correctly. Because in operating the vehicle correctly, we have a chance to liberate the passenger. And liberate the passenger from its concerns of what kind of vehicle it is and where it's going in this life and what's going to happen to it. So the design imprinting is very important for us. And remember that when we're looking at imprinting, what we're looking at is differentiation. The design information shows you how different your vehicle is from the others. Well, it's one of those jokes. From the moment of conception, the fetus is endowed with a design crystal and a magnetic monopole. It's endowed with a vehicle and a driver. And that vehicle and that driver moves the development of that fetus along in its biological process. And then 88 degrees of the movement of the sun, approximately 88, 89 days, or what in a normal pregnancy would be called the final trimester. In that space before the birth, suddenly there it is, the personality crystal enters into the vehicle. And by the way, the personality crystal is called into the vehicle by the magnetic monopole. And it's only called in when the vehicle is ready for it, and that is the neocortex, because this is basically where the passenger sits. And the whole thing about the nature of the personality is that the personality is more powerful in the way in which we as a whole relate to these aspects than anything else. It is the personality that has us in its thrall, and it's the personality that gives us such a pain in this life. The personality is who you think you are. That's all. It is the passenger. It is not the vehicle. It's so obvious. It's the wheel on the other side of the triangle. There is no real relationship between the design and the personality. Think about it mystically. Your personality crystal is basically eternal. So this personality crystal has been in many forms. That is, it's been coupled with many different design crystals, incarnation after incarnation. It's just another vehicle. It's like going out and getting a new car. And the personality crystal dominates. It dominates because this is what we have direct access to. Direct access to. It's who we think we are. This is the first real chance for anyone to glimpse the limitation of their self-knowledge is by looking at their design and seeing the black of the personality, that only the black is what they think of as themselves, and then to see not simply all the red, but what happens when the black and the red meet, because so often that leads to definitions and many other things. In other words, we know very, very, very little about ourselves, and yet we think we know. We think we know. And this is the nature of the personality. The other thing to recognize about the personality crystal is that the personality crystal is taking in the direct consciousness stream. It is the personality crystal that filters the neutrino consciousness field. That's what it does. And it filters it through a specific differentiation. In other words, each and every personality crystal has its way of filtering the neutrino stream. Who we think we are. But who we think we are is a deep limitation, which is why thinking that we think we can think, and thinking that we think that we can do, can only lead to disaster in this life. It's why this knowledge is about teaching how to eliminate resistance at a mechanical level.